The dawn broke over Memorial Hospital's towering structure, painting the glass windows in hues of amber and gold. Sarah Mitchell parked her well-loved Honda Civic in the same spot she'd claimed for the past 5 years. Section D, third row from the entrance, right beneath the sprawling oak tree that sheltered her car from summer heat and winter snow. Today felt different. The air hummed with possibility as Sarah gathered her things, knowing that upstairs, in room 407, Jessica Martinez was preparing to welcome twins into the world. She'd been following Jessica's high-risk pregnancy for months, staying late to monitor her progress, and arriving early to ensure everything remained stable. Sarah adjusted her deep purple scrubs, a deliberate choice, as she'd learned that the cheerful color helped ease her youngest patient's anxiety. Her natural hair was neatly wrapped in a colorful headscarf that matched her outfit, a gift from a grateful mother whose daughter had survived a challenging appendectomy under Sarah's care. The morning routine was embedded in her muscle memory. Badge clipped to her collar, comfortable shoes double-knotted, stethoscope draped around her neck. She'd worked the night shift yesterday, pulling a double to cover for Jenny, whose son had come down with flu. Her locker upstairs still held her spare ID, tucked inside, the love prescription, a romance novel she'd been stealing chapters of during lunch breaks. The sliding doors whooshed open, greeting her with the familiar antiseptic smell that had become as natural as breathing. But something was different. The security desk, usually staffed by Joe or Marcus, who knew her well enough to ask about her mother's garden, now hosted an unfamiliar face. A new security guard, Thomas Wheeler according to his name tag, sat rigidly behind a newly installed second checkpoint. ID and secondary verification, please, he demanded, barely looking up from his computer screen. Sarah reached for her primary badge, then felt her heart skip. The second ID was still upstairs, nestled between the pages of Chapter 7, where Dr. Richardson was about to confess his love to Nurse Stevens during a thunderstorm. "Good morning," Sarah began, her voice carrying the warmth she'd cultivated over years of calming anxious patients. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, Pediatric Unit. My second ID is in my locker upstairs. I worked a double yesterday and must have left it there. I can have Nurse Manager Stevens verify my identity, or we could call up to pediatrics." Wheeler's expression remained impassive. New policy as of this morning. No exceptions. The words "new policy" hung in the air like heavy storm clouds. Through the glass doors, Sarah could see the morning shift arriving. Mostly familiar faces, some already waving to Wheeler as they passed through with single IDs. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jessica's husband saying the contractions were getting closer. "Please," Sarah tried again, her professional calm unwavering. "I have twins arriving today, and their mother specifically requested." "Step aside, Mom," Wheeler cut in, standing up. "You're holding up the line." Behind her, Dr. Thompson, who'd started the same year she had walked through with a quick flash of his primary badge. Wheeler barely glancing his way. Sarah felt her phone buzz again. The contractions were now 5 minutes apart. In that moment, as the morning sun streamed through the glass doors and her phone continued to vibrate with increasing urgency, Sarah Mitchell faced a choice that would ripple far beyond the sterile halls of Memorial Hospital. She drew in a deep breath, remembering the oath she'd taken to put her patients first, and made her decision. Little did she know, security cameras were recording every second, and the next few minutes would change not just her life, but the lives of countless others in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The scene unfolded like a slow-motion sequence in a film nobody wanted to watch. Sarah stood her ground, one hand instinctively clutching her phone as another contraction update from Jessica's husband lit up the screen. 3 minutes apart now. "Where are you, Sarah?" A small crowd had gathered, early shift nurses pausing on their way in, outpatient visitors slowing their pace, even the cafeteria worker who always saved Sarah the last blueberry muffin. Through the growing tension, Sarah maintained her professional demeanor, her voice steady as summer rain. "Mr. Wheeler," she began again, "I understand you're following protocol. But upstairs, There's a mother about to deliver twins, and I'm her primary nurse. If you could just call." The click of handcuffs interrupted her plea. Later, when the security footage went viral, viewers would note how Sarah never raised her voice, never lost her composure. Even as Wheeler radioed for backup, she remained perfectly still, her only movement being her eyes darting to the elevator that would have taken her to room 407. Maria Santos, a night shift custodian, was the first to pull out her phone and start recording. Her hands trembled slightly, but her aim remained true as she captured Wheeler's rigid stance, the confused murmurs of onlookers, and most importantly, Sarah's quiet dignity. The timestamp on Maria's video would later become crucial: 6:47 a.m. By 6:52 a.m., Dr. Elena Rodriguez, head of pediatrics, burst through the stairwell door. She'd run down 4 flights of stairs after hearing about the situation from a breathless intern. "This is ridiculous," she announced, her white coat flaring behind her. "I can verify Nurse Mitchell's identity. I've worked with her for 5 years." But bureaucracy, once set in motion, moves with all the flexibility of dry concrete. Wheeler had already called hospital security and local law enforcement, citing uncooperative behavior and security protocol violation. The irony of Sarah being labeled uncooperative. She who had once spent 36 hours straight at the hospital during a winter storm to ensure her patients had continuous care was not lost on her colleagues. Upstairs, Jessica Martinez gripped her husband's hand through another contraction, asking repeatedly for the nurse who had promised to be there. In the lobby, Sarah's phone continued its urgent dance of incoming messages, each buzz a reminder of promises she was being prevented from keeping. By 7:15 a.m., the video had made its first rounds on social media. A former patient's mother, recognizing Sarah, added context in all caps. "This is the angel who saved my Dave Juchitier's life last year. She stayed after her shift to teach me how to care for Emily's feeding tube. She made my scared little girl laugh during the darkest times. What are they doing?" The post exploded. By breakfast time, #NurseSarah was trending locally. By lunch, former patients began showing up at the hospital with signs and stories. The twins were born at 8:23 a.m. and 8:27 a.m., healthy boys who entered the world without the gentle guidance of the nurse who had supported their mother through months of anxiety and preparation. That evening, as Sarah finally returned home after hours of questioning and processing, she found her front porch covered with flowers, cards, and small gifts. Among them was a handmade poster from the pediatric ward's young patients, covered in colorful handprints and wobbly signatures. In the center, written in a child's determined scrawl, "We love you, Nurse Sarah. You make the scary stuff not scary." She picked up the poster with trembling hands, finally allowing herself to feel the weight of the day. Her phone buzzed one last time. A photo of the twins, tiny and perfect, with a message from Jessica. "They're waiting to meet their favorite nurse. We'll keep fighting for you, just like you fought for us." The Crimson Coffee House sat tucked between a bookstore and a vintage record shop, its bay windows streaming morning light across copper-top tables. Sarah chose this spot carefully for her first meeting with attorney Angela Rodriguez, away from the hospital's imposing shadow, yet close enough to her evening shift if needed. Angela arrived carrying a weathered leather briefcase that had seen countless courtrooms. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her warm brown eyes carried the kind of wisdom that came from decades of turning obstacles into opportunities. She spotted Sarah immediately, recognizing her from the videos that had now garnered over 1 million views. "I ordered you their specialty chai," Sarah said, gesturing to the steaming cup. "The barista mentioned you're here every Thursday morning." Angela smiled, settling into the worn leather chair. "You do your homework." "That's good. We'll need that attention to detail." She pulled out a leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with precise handwriting. "But before we discuss the case, tell me about the twins." Sarah's face brightened instantly. "Julian and Marco. I visited them yesterday. Both exactly 6 pounds, 3 ounces. Jessica's teaching them to recognize my voice through daily video calls. She paused, fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. You know, during my shift last night, 3 different mothers requested to be transferred to different hospitals for their deliveries. They're worried about the security policies. Angela nodded, jotting notes. That's exactly what we need to focus on. The ripple effects. This isn't just about one incident. It's about healthcare access, about trust, about... She stopped, noticing Sarah pulling out her own notebook. It was a simple spiral-bound diary, its covers decorated with children's stickers, tiny stars, and cartoon bandages. I've kept this since my first day at Memorial, Sarah explained, opening to a dog-eared page. Every patient, every challenge, every small victory. For the next hour, they pored over Sarah's entries. There was the story of Tommy, a 7-year-old cancer patient who refused to take his medicine until Sarah turned it into a daily superhero power-up ritual. Notes about Maria, a Spanish-speaking mother whose premature baby needed special care. Sarah had learned key phrases in Spanish just to help her understand the treatment plan. Look at this, Angela said suddenly, pointing to a pattern in Sarah's entries. You've documented every security check for the past year. Times, dates, names, and the varying protocols used for different staff members. Sarah nodded slowly. I started noticing inconsistencies, but I never thought I'd need this information until now. The attorney's eyes sparked with recognition. Sarah, do you remember the Thompson case from '98? A nurse in Atlanta documented similar patterns. Her detailed records helped change hospital policies across 3 states. Outside, the morning crowd bustled past the window, unaware of the quiet determination building inside. Angela pulled out her phone, showing Sarah a photo of a young woman in law school graduation robes. This is me, 1989. I was told I didn't look like a lawyer. Every time I walk into a courtroom, I still carry that moment with me. But I turned it into fuel. Sarah reached for her own phone, pulling up a photo of herself graduating nursing school, standing proud in her white uniform. First in my family to finish college, she said softly. Mom worked 2 jobs to help make it happen. Angela closed her notebook with quiet purpose. Then let's make sure your story helps another first happen. The first time Memorial Hospital looks at their policies and sees people, not just procedures. As they gathered their things, the barista approached with 2 fresh cups. On the house, she said, my sister was one of your patients last year, Sarah. The one with the butterfly bandages. Sarah's eyes lit up with recognition. Amy, how's she doing with her art therapy? Still drawing butterflies. The barista smiled. And now, she wants to be a nurse. Courtroom 302 of the county courthouse retained its dignity despite the summer heat, its oak panels and green leather chairs creating an atmosphere of timeless authority. Sarah sat at the defendant's table, her purple scrubs replaced by a navy blue dress her mother had carefully ironed the night before. Every bench behind her was filled. Nurses still in scrubs from their shifts. Former patients and their families, even Dr. Rodriguez, who had rescheduled 3 surgeries to be present. Judge William Blackwood's entrance brought the usual call to order, but today felt different. Perhaps it was the unusual mix of medical professionals and legal minds, or maybe it was the small drawing poking out of Sarah's folder, a crayon sketch of a nurse with wings, drawn by Tommy during his latest chemotherapy session. Your Honor, Angela began, her voice carrying the weight of decades in courtrooms, I'd like to call Sarah Mitchell to the stand. The walk to the witness stand felt longer than the hospital's longest corridor. Sarah's shoes, sensible flats she wore during 12-hour shifts, made no sound on the carpeted floor. As she settled into the wooden chair, she caught sight of Wheeler in the gallery, his security uniform pressed and perfect, his expression unreadable. Ms. Mitchell, Angela said, please tell us about December 24th last year. Sarah's voice, accustomed to soothing frightened children, filled the courtroom with warmth. It was Christmas Eve. We had 17 children in the pediatric ward, too sick to go home for the holidays. Their parents were exhausted, worried, trying to make the holiday special despite the beeping machines and medical procedures. She described how she'd arrived early, wearing reindeer antlers that lit up and played tinny Christmas songs. How she'd organized the nurses to sing carols while delivering medications. How they'd helped parents hide small gifts under pillows and behind IV poles. "And your security clearance that night?" Angela prompted. "I forgot my badge at home in the rush to bring in the holiday decorations," Sarah admitted. Joe, Officer Joseph Martinez, was on duty. He'd known me for 4 years. He called up to verify my identity and let me through because there were children waiting for their pain medications. The prosecutor, a young man named David Chen, stood for cross-examination. "So you admit to violating security protocols before?" "Objection, Your Honor," Angela interjected. "Counsel is attempting to establish a pattern from a single incident that was handled through proper channels." "Sustained," Judge Blackwood said, but his eyes remained fixed on Sarah. "Ms. Mitchell," Chen continued, "isn't hospital security paramount for patient safety?" Sarah straightened in her chair. "Patient safety is why I became a nurse. It's why I learned the names of every child's stuffed animal. Why I memorized their allergies and favorite songs. It's why I stayed during the blizzard last winter, sleeping on a cot between shifts because the roads were closed and my patients needed me." She pulled out her diary, the one filled with stickers and hopes and small victories. "May I read something, Your Honor?" Judge Blackwood nodded, his usual stern expression softening slightly. April 15th, Sarah read, "Maria learned to hold her premature daughter today. Her hand shook so much she was afraid she'd drop her. I showed her how to support the baby's head, how to transfer her from the incubator. She cried and said gracias 14 times. I counted because each one felt like a gift." The courtroom remained silent as Sarah looked up. Security isn't just about badges and checkpoints. It's about creating an environment where healing can happen, where families feel safe enough to be vulnerable, where children know they're protected. That morning, I had twins waiting to be born, and their mother was counting on me. Every second I spent arguing about an ID was a second those babies and their mother didn't have their nurse. Even Wheeler shifted in his seat as Judge Blackwood leaned forward, his silver-rimmed glasses catching the light. "Continue, Ms. Mitchell. Tell us about the moment you decided to stay at that checkpoint instead of leaving to retrieve your second ID." Judge William Blackwood's study carried the weight of 30 years on the bench in its dark mahogany shelves and leather-bound law books. The grandfather clock in the corner, a gift from his late wife, ticked steadily toward midnight as he spread Sarah Mitchell's case files across his desk. His daughter Rachel's latest medical school photo smiled up at him from its silver frame. She wore the same determined expression he'd seen on Sarah's face in the courtroom. Next to it lay the local newspaper, its headline bold and unavoidable. "Memorial Hospital birth rates dropped 30% after security incident." Removing his reading glasses, he rubbed his tired eyes. The legal pad before him contained his usual methodical notes, but tonight they seemed to blur into questions rather than answers. His coffee had gone cold, forgotten during hours of reviewing security footage, witness statements, and hospital records. Sarah's diary entries, submitted as evidence, lay open beside him. One passage caught his eye again. "Today I taught Michael, age 6, how to be brave during his shots. We pretended the needle was a tiny spaceship delivering superhero medicine. He got through all 3 vaccinations without tears, then taught his technique to the scared little girl in the next room. Sometimes courage spreads like ripples in a pond." The judge picked up his pen, then set it down again. In his mind, he heard Rachel's voice from their Sunday dinner conversation. "Dad, do you know how many split-second decisions we have to make in medicine? How many times protocol and patient needs seem to conflict?" His clerk had left a stack of statistics on his desk, hospital security breach reports from the past 5 years. The numbers told their own story. 23 incidents of staff entering without proper identification, 18 resolved with verbal warnings, 5 with written reprimands. Sarah's case was the first to result in arrest. The clock struck midnight as Blackwood opened his laptop, searching through his past rulings. Cases of professional judgment calls, moments where strict adherence to rules had to be balanced against human necessity. His cursor hovered over a case from 2019, a firefighter who had broken protocol to save a child, facing departmental charges. He'd ruled in the firefighter's favor then, writing in his opinion, "While protocols exist to protect, they must not become barriers to the very protection they seek to ensure." A soft ding announced a new email, the hospital board's latest statement. They were reviewing security procedures, it said, after multiple physicians threatened to transfer to other facilities. The same hospital where Rachel would begin her residency next year. Blackwood stood, walking to his window. The city lights twinkled below, and somewhere out there, he knew Sarah Mitchell was probably still awake too, perhaps checking on patients during a night shift or preparing for tomorrow's final hearing. His reflection stared back at him, overlaid against the city skyline. The judge who had always prided himself on seeing the letter of the law clearly now found himself pondering its spirit. The security footage played again in his mind. Sarah, professional and calm, trying to explain about the twins who needed her. Wheeler, rigid and unyielding, following rules that suddenly seemed less clear-cut in the gray hours of night. Returning to his desk, Judge Blackwood began to write. His pen moved with purpose now, finding words that would bridge the gap between justice and compassion. The first light of dawn was creeping through his window when he finally sat back, looking at what he'd written. The legal pad held not just his ruling, but a roadmap for change. Tomorrow's hearing would not just decide Sarah's case, it would challenge the very way institutions balance security with humanity. As he finally prepared for a few hours' rest, his eyes fell once more on Rachel's photo. "First, do no harm," he murmured, remembering the oath she'd taken, so similar to the one Sarah Mitchell lived by every day. The story of Sarah Mitchell flowed through Memorial Hospital's corridors like a gentle but unstoppable tide, carried by whispered conversations and shared memories. In the pediatric break room, Nurse Jenny Martinez opened her phone's photo gallery, showing a group of new residents a video from last Halloween. "This was Sarah," she explained, displaying footage of a nurse dressed as Mary Poppins, dancing with ivy poles decorated as carousel horses. She organized the whole pediatric ward parade, even got the pharmacists to dress up as penguins. Down in physical therapy, Mr. Chen, recovering from a stroke, pointed to a hand-drawn chart on his wall. "Nurse Sarah made this," he said, his speech careful but proud. "She learned basic Mandarin to help me track my progress. See these little stars? Each one means I reached a goal." The local news van had become a fixture in the hospital parking lot, but today's story wasn't about security protocols or legal proceedings. Instead, Channel 7's Emma Torres was interviewing Dr. Petal from the neonatal intensive care unit. Sarah developed what we now call the Comfort Connection program, Dr. Petal explained, gesturing to a row of tablets mounted on the NICU wall. When parents can't be here physically, she sets up video calls so they can sing lullabies to their babies. We've seen remarkable improvements in infant vital signs during these sessions. In the hospital cafeteria, Maria Santos, the custodian who'd recorded the original video, found herself surrounded by curious colleagues during her lunch break. "You want to know what I saw that morning?" she asked, stirring her coffee. "I saw someone who didn't forget her humanity just because others forgot theirs." The afternoon shift change brought a surprise. A group of nursing students from the local university, each wearing purple ribbons pinned to their white coats. Their instructor, Professor Helen Chung, explained to the news crew, "We're incorporating Sarah's case into our ethics curriculum. It's already generating some of the most profound discussions I've witnessed in 20 years of teaching." Outside the hospital's main entrance, where everything had started, a makeshift bulletin board appeared. "Hospital staff, patients and visitors began posting their Sarah stories. Each note revealed a different facet of her impact. She learned sign language in a week to help my deaf son feel less afraid of his surgery. During the power outage last summer, she used her phone's flashlight to read stories to the kids for 6 straight hours. When my daughter was diagnosed with diabetes, Sarah stayed late every day for a week to teach our whole family about proper care. The stories reached beyond the hospital walls. Local coffee shops started displaying signs. Nurses drink free. Inspired by Sarah M., a children's book author who'd once shadowed Sarah for research, announced a new series about a kind nurse who solved hospital mysteries. Even Wheeler, watching the growing movement from his security desk, found his certainty wavering. During his lunch break, he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a card he'd received last week. Inside, a child's wobbly handwriting read, "Thank you for protecting our hospital, but please let Nurse Sarah come back to sing to us. The other nurses try, but they don't know all the dinosaur songs like she does." As evening settled over the hospital, Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at her office window, watching the shift change below. Her phone buzzed with a message from a colleague at City General. "Our board just approved a complete overhaul of security protocols. We're calling it the Mitchell Amendment. Sometimes it takes one person to show us all a better way." She smiled, remembering something Sarah had told her during their first year working together. "In healthcare, we don't just treat symptoms, we learn from them. Every challenge is an opportunity to heal more than just the immediate hurt." The setting sun cast long shadows across the hospital grounds, where a small garden of purple flowers had spontaneously appeared near the entrance. A simple sign stood among them: "For every person who comes here seeking help, and every person who dedicates their life to providing it." The soft glow of Sarah's laptop illuminated her small home office at 3 a.m., her screensaver a rotating collection of photos from her years at Memorial. Birthday celebrations in the pediatric ward, graduation ceremonies for young patients who'd beaten their illnesses, quiet moments of triumph shared with families. She'd been working on her proposal for 6 straight hours, fueled by determination and her mother's special Che recipe. Security through understanding. A humanitarian approach to hospital safety, read the document's title. Below it, page after page of carefully researched recommendations took shape, each one born from real experiences. When Jamie Watson, age 4, came in for chemotherapy, she typed, his father was initially stopped at security because his ID had expired. Jamie's anxiety attacks required his father's presence during treatment. The solution wasn't in the rulebook. It came from human connection. Officer Martinez called the oncology department, verified the situation, and established a temporary protocol for families of long-term patients. Her phone lit up with a text from Angela. "Can't sleep either. Just reviewed your draft. This is more than a proposal. It's a blueprint for change." Sarah smiled, remembering their conversation earlier that day. They'd sat in a hospital garden, watching as maintenance staff installed new signs, "Welcome to Memorial Hospital, where compassion meets care." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Her proposal continued to grow, incorporating insights from unexpected sources. Wheeler had surprised everyone by sending an email detailing his own observations about security gaps and suggestions for improvement. His perspective as a former military officer added valuable insights about maintaining safety without sacrificing humanity. "Security staff should receive basic medical awareness training," she wrote. "Understanding the urgency of medical situations allows for better judgment calls. Example: a security officer with basic training can distinguish between a routine visit and a medical emergency, adapting protocols accordingly." Dawn was breaking when Sarah added the final section: Implementation Strategy, Building Bridges. It outlined a 3-month plan for integrating new procedures. Week 1 to 2, joint training sessions for medical and security staff. Week 3 to 4, creation of rapid verification protocols for emergency situations. Week 5 to 6, installation of direct communication lines between security and medical departments. Week 7 to 8, Development of a known personnel database with biometric options. Week 9 to 12. Regular feedback sessions and protocol adjustments. As she proofread her work, a new email arrived from Dr. Rodriguez. Sarah, the hospital board wants to meet. They've reviewed early drafts of your proposal. The CEO mentioned something about systemic transformation. Your persistence is paying off. The morning sun cast long shadows across her desk, where a stack of letters from supporters sat waiting to be read. On top was a crayon-decorated envelope from the pediatric ward. Inside, she found a drawing of herself standing between a security guard and a doctor, all holding hands. The caption, written in a child's unsteady hand, read, "Everyone helps everyone." Sarah added one final paragraph to her proposal. At Memorial Hospital, we have an opportunity to demonstrate that safety and compassion are not opposing forces, but rather two essential elements of the same goal, protecting and caring for those who need us most. Every policy we implement should ask one fundamental question: does this help us better serve our patients? As she prepared for her morning shift, Sarah glanced at the small plaque her mother had given her when she graduated nursing school. Its message seemed particularly relevant today. Courage isn't about being fearless. It's about transforming fear into purpose. Her phone buzzed one last time. A message from Judge Blackwood's clerk. His Honor requests your presence tomorrow morning. Please bring your proposal. He's particularly interested in Section 3, balancing protocol with patient care. The morning sun streamed through the courthouse windows, painting golden stripes across the polished floor as Sarah straightened her blazer, navy blue, borrowed from her sister, with a small purple ribbon pinned to the lapel. The courtroom had filled beyond capacity, with people lining the walls and spilling into the hallway. Judge Blackwood entered, his usual stern demeanor softened by something that looked almost like anticipation. As he settled into his chair, his eyes fell on a familiar silver frame that hadn't been on his bench before, his daughter Rachel's medical school graduation photo. "Before we proceed," he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the hushed room, "I'd like to share something. Last night, my daughter, now Dr. Blackwood, called from her first emergency room rotation. She told me about a young mother who arrived with twins in respiratory distress. Dad, she said, protocols told me to wait for certain paperwork, but every second mattered. I chose to treat first." He paused, removing his glasses. Ms. Mitchell approached the bench. Sarah walked forward, her proposal clutched in hands that remained steadied despite her racing heart. Behind her sat Wheeler, now wearing a purple ribbon of his own. "This court has reviewed your proposal extensively," Judge Blackwood continued. "More importantly, we've witnessed something remarkable. A moment of crisis transformed into an opportunity for profound change. Your response to adversity wasn't to fight against the system, but to improve it." He lifted a document bearing the county seal. "The findings of this court are as follows. First, all charges against Sarah Mitchell are dismissed. Second, her proposal, security through understanding, is hereby recommended for implementation not just at Memorial Hospital, but across all medical facilities in our jurisdiction." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Blackwood raised his hand for silence. "But there's more. The State Medical Board has approved funding for a new training program, with Ms. Mitchell as its first director. This program will bridge the gap between security protocols and patient care, ensuring that safety and compassion work in harmony." Sarah's vision blurred with tears as Judge Blackwood continued. "Sometimes justice isn't about determining right from wrong. Sometimes it's about recognizing when our systems need to evolve." From the gallery, a baby's cry pierced the formal atmosphere. Jessica Martinez stood, cradling one of the twins. "Sorry, Your Honor," she whispered, "but they wanted to be here for their nurse Sarah." The judge's face softened into a smile. "Let the record show that the youngest supporters of healthcare reform are present." A gentle laugh rippled through the courtroom. Wheeler stood next. "Your Honor, I'd like to be the first to enroll in the new training program. I've learned that true security comes from understanding, not just enforcement. As the proceedings concluded, Sarah found herself surrounded by her community: nurses, doctors, patients, and even security staff. Dr. Rodriguez handed her a set of keys. "Your new office is ready. We've already hung up the children's artwork." Outside, television crews clustered on the courthouse steps, but Sarah's attention was drawn to a small group of nursing students waiting nearby, their white coats bright in the morning sun. "Ms. Mitchell," one called out, "would you teach us about more than just procedures?" Sarah looked at her proposal, then at the faces around her: Wheeler's newfound humility, Judge Blackwood's quiet pride, the young nurse's eager hope. She remembered her mother's words about turning fear into purpose. "The first lesson," she said, her voice clear and strong, "is that every person who walks through those hospital doors carries a story. Our job isn't just to follow rules or provide treatment. It's to understand those stories and become part of them in the right way." As if on cue, both twins began to coo, their tiny hands reaching toward the sun. New life, new beginnings, and the endless possibility of positive change, all wrapped in the simple truth that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stand our ground with grace and show others a better way forward.